ELI5. Why do anesthesiologists ask us to count back from 10 before going under? Ear nurse here. I use it when similarly sedating patients for procedures despite the rolling eyes of my co-workers. Often when you're trying to sedate someone it's hard to tell when it's working, especially if it's a conscious sedation where they'll be awake but not remember the procedure. The counting backwards method works great because the person being sedated will usually stop once it starts working. Also provides some mild comfort in the process. Some people will get paradoxically anxious as they start fading and it gives them something to do. I've been a surgical nurse for 18 years and I have never not once heard an anesthesiologist ask anyone to count down from anything. I've also had like 12 surgeries myself and it never happened. It's dumb. I think it's a Hollywood thing that everyone believes, like when a pregnant woman in a movie or a TV show has one contraction and is in labor and delivers in like a half hour. Or the water breaks and she's now pushing. All bullshit. Honestly, there's no definitive purpose. It's sort of like a learned thing for the anesthesiologist to say. Yes, it can help determine consciousness but there are other ways to do those. Backwards is because counting forwards can be done very fast, so you might count up to 10 in 1.5 seconds whereas counting back from 10 usually takes 5 seconds or so. It's similar to doctor-nurse saying take a deep breath while giving an injection. In my experience, it doesn't really matter, because once you take that first inhale of drugs, I've never gotten to the number 2 or to 98 or 8, whatever they instruct which number to start from. I've had to be put under 4 times as an adult and each time, I always joke with the anesthesiologist that I'm going to make it to the count of 5, and they've all had basically the same response: yeah, sure, buddy. Good luck with that. I had surgery earlier this month. They didn't count down. They asked me questions. They asked me where I worked, then they asked what I do. I saw my vision getting fuzzy, so I said, "Why? You guys don't care. Goodbye." And went out. When they masked me, they said, "We're just gonna give you some oxygen." I knew what was up, but I had told them I was anxious, so I guess that was a slick move. I just went under anesthesia for the first time ever a week ago. I was terrified. Haha. The anesthesiologist didn't say anything to me besides asking me a couple medical related questions. The nurse, who was the only one really paying any attention to my mental state, said it's okay, just take a deep breath and go to sleep. And I literally took a deep breath and fell asleep. Lol. Because counting forward starting from 1 is a skill we practiced a lot during our life and most of us can do it on autopilot. You don't need many cognitive faculties to count forward, but to count backward you typically need to be more concentrated and think a bit more about it. So it's a better indication of how the anesthetic affected you. When I was a teen I had an emergency appendectomy. I asked the anesthesiologist if I should count down and he said sure if I wanted. I started at 10 and made it to 0. Thinking I was real smooth I could -1, -2, and then I woke up the next day with a missing appendix, 16 staples and week in the hospital ahead of me. When I was going under there was none of that count backwards. She was telling me she'll let me know when it's going and that was a lie. Lol. I remember when I felt it, then I saw red and passed out. Then she said my name. I awoke, best sleep I've had in a while. I don't want to do that ever again. But it seems it'll be often. I'm a UK anesthetist anesthesiologist in USA and elsewhere. I have never asked anyone to count. I just chat to the patient and ask if they are warm enough when I think they might be anesthetized. Loss of verbal response is the endpoint for propofol. I'm an anesthesiologist and I have never done this and I have never seen it done. I think it is a TV trope that people assume is common. If I had to guess a reason, it's because when you stop counting means that the drugs have kicked in. I've never done that and I've never seen any other anesthesiologist do that. There's not much good reason other than giving the patient something to do. I just ask them to focus on their breathing, in and out, nice and slow and relaxed. I'm a nurse and none of the anesthesiologists I work with do this. When they start pushing propofol they usually say this is a medication that'll put you to sleep and they're out a few seconds later. Whenever I induce a patient I ask them questions about their lives. What type of work they do, if they have any kids, what their hobbies are, etc. It keeps their minds occupied so they don't get nervous. From the patient perspective, it really hammers home how good these meds are. It took me about 1 second to count from 10 to 9, and about 12 hours to count from 9 to 8. Count from 1 to 10 as fast as possible. It's easy, you don't have to think about it, and takes seconds. Now count from 10 to 1, noticeably and consistently slower. I've stopped asking patients to count anymore. Sometimes they want to, but usually not. Meds kicking in under 5 seconds, so not really a point anymore. I thought this only happens in movies. When they put me under, the last thing I remember is telling the doctors that it feels very much like ketamine. I remember having to count down years ago, but more recently I was asked what my favorite place to be was while they knocked me out. It's a countdown and makes the patient think that they are going to sleep at 1. Also, it's funny to see them go 10, 9, gives you something to do, keeps you from freaking out. Also, they'll know if when it's taking effect slurring than silent, because most people can't count backwards from 65,535 by only prime numbers without using a calculator and Google. I've had maybe 8ish procedures where they put me under, not once did anyone ask me to count. Shrug. I guess it implies they don't know much about anesthesia if they got to rely on you counting to tell when you are out. I feel like it's a side bet in the or to see who gets closest to the number when the CPU shuts down. Lol. I remember thinking, okay, but this isn't going to work. 10,9,8. I don't think I made it to 7.